Dark Souls, a game that's very well known and very loved to the point where an entire franchise and Souls-like games are made based on Dark Souls and the Dark Souls trilogy because apparently it is that good of a game, and it's also well known for being one of the hardest games to play, especially for the trilogy. And it challenges people playing the game, making them die multiple times, and it's known for being good and very hard. Now, the whole reason why I'm even talking about Dark Souls is because I've never played it before personally. I've always heard from my friends that's a good game and that Dark Souls 3 is the best one out of them all, and this and that, and that's really hard, and people rage over it and la di da di da. And I've played Geometry Dash, so I've played some hard games, if you don't know what that is. But recently, I've gotten the FPS fatigue and decided to dive into Dark Souls for the first time ever. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into other than the game's hard. And this video, I'm just basically giving my review in the sense of the game from someone who's never played it or has seen clips of it before. And to start off this little rant, the game is so directionless that it just makes me mad. Not because the game is hard, but because the game, if you don't look up where to go next, it is literally impossible to go further within the game. And if you don't know what I mean, here is a great example. So, after defeating the first boss in the tutorial area, you go to Firelink Shrine, and you can either go up and go through the catacombs, or you go out a little bit and go through the Undead Parish area. I didn't know that there's a side path to the Undead Parish. So I went to the path that looked like it was basically normal to take, the catacombs. And I wasted 6 hours of my time trying to get through this as a level 1, not knowing anything about the game stats or nothing, because I didn't want to look it up. I wanted to enjoy the game, experience everything within it, and have fun. And I was not having fun. And it was to the point where I was able to beat the boss. The first boss, once you enter the catacombs. I don't know what his name is, the guy with the multiple faces. I was able to beat him the first time I started this game. And I was so pissed off because I had to make a shortcut to get through the catacombs without getting one shot. And then versus that boss, it grinded my gears so much. And there isn't any direction of where to go to progress the game. There's extremely vague dialogue with NPCs if you find any. And you basically have to look up on YouTube where to go and certain paths. Because this game's map is massive. And I didn't know how big this game was till I looked up on YouTube videos of how big it is and like areas to go. It's huge. And if you don't know where you're going, you will be lost forever. And you'll be stuck in the exact same spot. And that's exactly what happened to me in the catacombs. So that's my first complaint. Too directionless. And people say it's a good thing about DS1 that's directionless, but not to the point where you can't even progress within the game. There should be little hints here and there and let you explore like a sandbox, but not to the expense of getting one shot if you take a wrong turn, or going down a path that is too overleveled for you and you don't even know. They should have warning signs for that, which they do not do at all in this game. Now, that one complaint's out of the way. Now, here is a something good within the game that I've played. After learning the game, the stats and what they do, because the game really doesn't tell you, and looking up where to go, once you get all of that down, then the game's really good. Like, it's challenging enough where it's not too hard, but it's not super easy. And I like how instead of going through a certain part, you're able to have a save point. They have save points at boss rooms sometimes. And I like that because it makes it more challenging instead of hitting the boss 1,000 times without going through the same trials and errors of getting there. And I like the challenge of it. It makes it more fun and it's not too challenging. I've fought a lot of bosses and I'm over halfway through the game. And with all the bosses I fought so far, probably the hardest one I would say was the hardest for me was the boss room in And Orlando, the final boss that had like 2 bosses in it. That was tough, but I was able to complete it within like 10 or so tries. And it was very enjoyable because it makes you learn through trial and error. And I think that's very good for someone that's able to keep their cool and learn through their mistakes and learn attack patterns and how to dodge and all that. So the game basically makes you level up your base skills instead of relying on items within the game or combinations within the game. And I love that. Now, another complaint. How I mentioned in my previous point where it's nice how they make it challenging where instead of spawning right where the boss is and find him again, you have to go through some trial and errors to get there again to fight the boss. Sometimes it is aggressive how long it takes to get to the boss again because you have to go through a lot of mobs again to get to the boss. And it kind of loses luster after dying 5 or 10 times and going back through the same route again, and it's really annoying. Super annoying. But it's not really that big of a deal. You just gotta freaking power through. Now, a good point that I've seen in the game is the aesthetic. I love the aesthetic and the weapons, the armor. I love all of it and how there is such a very deep and intricate path that you could take. And it's not like you could choose 1 or 2 or 3 paths. There's so many ways to play this game with a dexterity build, a dodge like crazy, or a strength build where you just tank everything and then just bonk them once and they're dead. And I'm going with like a strength dex route where I like to do a lot of damage, but I also want to have the mobility to dodge and whatever instead of just tanking hits. And I love that because there's so many variants and different ways to play the game with weapons and armor and stat points and all that, and it's really cool. And I discovered what soft cap and hard cap is. Perfect system. And I would say another complaint from the very beginning, you would waste a lot of time leveling up a stat that you didn't know you're getting nothing out of without looking at it and realizing, oh god, I leveled this up 5 more times than I should have. But that's where you have to look it up. So through all this ranting, and through someone that's been over halfway done with Dark Souls, what is my take? I will say that I think this game is almost to the level of hype people say it is, but it needs to be described more in a sense. And I guess I said that wrong. To rephrase it, it almost lives up to the hype, and the very big damper that brings this game from like an A to an S level game is that you have to look up stuff in order to figure out Dark Souls. You can't figure out on your own, and that really sucks and kind of loses its luster in discovering the game. Because with the game being so vast and so many twists and turns and so many things you can do in the game, you can't, there isn't anything within the game that describes things to you for you to understand. Is simply through trial and error, and sometimes if there is no direction or guidance, then trial and error will never work. That's my really main complaint that brings this game from like an A to like a B plus for me. It's almost A. But, and also I forgot to mention in the beginning, I've only played Dark Souls 1. I haven't played 2 or 3 yet, or Elden Ring. I'm planning on playing all 4 of those games, well, 3, and I'm planning on completing Dark Souls and seeing after that point how good the trilogy is, because I heard that Dark Souls 3 is the best, and I thought I should start in order from Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, then Elden Ring. So, yep, that's my opinion with Dark Souls. I might have pissed off some people saying that it's not a really good game, that it's a very solid and well-made game, but it's not great. I'll say it's really good, but it's not great. And for that sole reason I mentioned in the beginning. So I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, do whatever you want, and wait till my next review once I fully complete Dark Souls. Deuces!